Preparing to live stream the meeting. This is further than I've gotten before.
Oh, it says that it is now streaming live.
Okay, you can see that. Perfect. So it's getting buffering right now or whatever that it processes that it does. Okay, I can see it on. So I think we are getting there. Yeah, I think we're good to go. Preparing to live stream the meeting. Okay. This is further than I've gotten before. So I need to.
Oh, it says that it is now streaming live.
I know. Okay, you can see that. Perfect. So it's getting buffering right now or whatever that it processes that it does. Okay, I can see it on. So I think we are.
You need to mute your YouTube. We're hearing your feedback through YouTube.
I know, I just stopped it. I think it's still streaming, so we're okay. But I just closed it off.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I think you're good to go, John.
Okay, it is 5:03. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you guys. We will open this up for public comment. For those of you who are new that are attending the meeting for the first time, we usually do about 10 minutes of public comment at the beginning and again at the end. So if you have any comments that you would like to make, you just need to identify yourself and say whatever is on your mind. Thank you. Anyone? Going once? Going twice? All right, thank you. We'll save it for the end. All right, and at this point, we can all review the norms that are on page 2 of the packet. All right, we all done? Okay, moving on, recommendation to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, any amendments to the minutes? Okay. Terrific. On to the report of the superintendent of schools, Randy.
Do you want you made a motion to approve them. Do you want to approve them?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. So I'm going to try to keep people coming in. So, sorry. All right. So Sue is on. We're asking you to approve a revenue anticipation note because we anticipate that we are going to need to borrow money due to challenges in cash flow. So you can see that the recommendation is a note for $1.9 million beginning September 23rd, due by November 23rd. We did request bids and received bids from 6 banks. Oh, one bid. We requested from 6 and received from 1. And so the recommendation is that we accept the bid from Community Bank, which is the only one that gave us a bid. Borrowing will cost no more than $6,455, which is $4,705 over budget. So that's my request.
Any discussion, Dean or Meredith?
I just have some questions about the revenue anticipation note and the $1.9 million gap. Could you please explain what goes into that number?
Sure. It's just a cash flow projection. So, I'm looking at when are we going to get revenues and when do I anticipate us having to spend money? Right now, the money that we have to spend is going to be the first half of our tuition payments to our schools. They're going to be sending those to us shortly if they haven't already, where Celeste is going to be reviewing them for residency. Mm-hmm. And cash flow, generally, the bulk of our money, as you know, comes from the education fund, which flows through the town, which your tax due date is October something, and then they have to give it to us within 20 days. So that's projected to be about October 31st. So that's where the number comes from. Basically, I project inflows and outflows, and our greatest point of, what is our largest deficit at that point in time, what we need, that I would expect we'd need to borrow to make sure we can cover all our bases. Whether or not we really have to borrow this money it's not set in stone, but we have to get the ball rolling, because if we do want to borrow it, we need the paperwork in place, signed, so that we can have the money if we need it.
Is there a break fee, or is there a use fee, a usage fee? So if we don't draw down, or we draw down less, we can pay less in interest?
Yes, so we are only charged for how long the borrowing lasts for. So they will give us the full amount of the note. It's not a line of credit, it's a note, but we can pay it back early. So that's why I say the maximum amount of interest we'd have to pay is that number, that 6,000 number. But, I would expect, I would work with Beth, obviously, on what kind of cash flow is the town getting? Is the town able to front us money? Typically they are. This isn't a normal year though. We have two things going on. One, we have a little more money that we're probably going to have to pay out due to people moving in and more kids. That's part of it. The other part of it is COVID, and whether or not people are going to pay their taxes on time. And is the town going to be in a place where there might be more delinquencies than there are usually? We don't know the answers to those questions yet. So if there are delinquencies, the town does not have to turn over money to us that they don't have right away. They have a 4-month extension on that. So I'll be working with Beth on, this is what I need, this is when I need it, what do you think you can give us? And if we don't need to borrow at all, we won't. And if we borrow and we can pay the note back earlier because the town can front us money earlier, then we'll pay it back earlier.
The other question that I have is in terms of financing options, and I don't know whether it's best to discuss this now because we're already on the topic of borrowing money, or to wait until we talk about what's going on in our current revenue environment with all the people moving into the town.
So I would encourage you to stay on the topic of the revenue anticipation note, because you need to determine if you're going to approve this or not. And then
the only reason why I'm saying it, Randy, is because if there is another financing that could potentially be issued by the town, I don't want to approve a revenue note if there could potentially be an educational revenue bond that the town may be issuing to cover some of that shortfall that we have financially.
I just say that approving this note isn't binding. I mean, we can approve this and then change our mind in minutes.
Thanks, Dean. I just didn't want to approve this and all of a sudden then have to go through all these hoops if we decide that alternative financing might be available to us as a potential solution to solve the gap.
Yeah. I actually had one quick question. I'm just curious. This has never been something that I've ever thought would be an issue before, but I mean, we're not anticipating any issues with actually dispersal of the money from the Ed Fund this year, are we?
We're not. The state hasn't said there were going to be any issues. The towns themselves, in Winhall's case, all of your money comes from the town, flows through the town. Right. I should say it's state money, but it's flowing through the town. So it's all turned over from the town to the school. We don't actually get any Ed Fund money directly from the state. But so it's not a matter of, the town is obligated to turn over those funds. The town's also obligated to turn over funds that they don't collect within a certain period of time, meaning the town would then have to borrow in order to make those payments to the district. But whether or not, so it's not a matter of us not expecting to receive the money, it's just a matter of when. And as I said, if in working with the town, with Beth, if she determines that there's enough cash flow at the town level that they can give us the money, we won't borrow. If there is enough cash flow that we can pay the note back earlier, we will. It's not a matter of you're approving the note because if we need to pay our bills, basically. So you're doing
and if you need the money, you need
If
to
we need
have
the money,
something in place.
we need a mechanism to do that. And because you only meet once a month, we have to
Yeah.
time it properly. So that's why we need approval on that now. But as I said, Beth knows that this is happening and she's waiting to be informed on what our needs are. And we continue to work with the town to make sure we're paying as little interest as possible.
I was just more asking in general because I know that the ed fund is a little stressed right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I know that it wouldn't affect us directly, but it would
Right.
affect our neighbors and our friends. So I'm just curious
Yeah.
if,
I know that ed fund payments have started to go out already. We haven't received ours. It's a different issue. It has to do with towns not having grant list data into the state. And that's
Gotcha.
just a timing thing.
Uh-huh.
But no, I have not heard that the state that is going to have any trouble getting the funds to the districts that they need.
Sue, quick question, and then I'm happy to move to end my portion of questions. Who is the borrower?
The town of Winhall,
So
Winhall
the
Town School
town-
District.
Technically,
Winhall Town
the
School
town-
District, you
the town
guys.
of Winhall is the borrower.
No, the Winhall Town School District is the borrower. You
Winhall
guys.
Town School District.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're the ones that need to borrow money.
I move that we approve the revenue note.
I will second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I don't think we moved to approve it.
Dean moved to approve it and
Oh, we
Jen
did.
seconded it. Okay. Okay. So the next two agenda items, I want to try if we can to keep them separate. There will be, I'm sure, some crossover, but the first one is the current enrollment, which I shared with you. Most current numbers, as you know, they're changing all the time. I can go over that with you, but I'm sure that you've all taken a look at them. And then 5C is a legislative overview, which is really the intention of that is to share with you the work that primarily Jennifer has done on your behalf over the last, oh gosh, I'd say solidly month and a half, probably 2 months. So we should keep them separate, but I tend to forget things. So I do want to just very, very publicly say that I have been unbelievably impressed in you as a board and as a community. I want to commend her for her incredible work and commitment to your town and community. And I cannot stress enough that the time, energy, perseverance, problem solving, tenacity that she has demonstrated to find a solution for the community of Winhall is something that you rarely see. And so I want to thank you, Jen, and I just want to publicly acknowledge in front of the rest of your board and your community members. your
Thank you.
incredible work,
Thank
okay?
you very much.
So I know I just did what I said not to do, which is combine things. That's the kind of thing that I would think now and then not say and then forget to say later because I get wrapped up in other things. So current enrollment, you can see the numbers that we pulled. These are changing pretty regularly, but right now you are about 33 students over budget. And Sue, this is, we didn't put the numbers in here, roughly $500,000 or so over budget.
I think that was in your email that you,
Okay.
or your testimony that you submitted.
Right, the
Like
numbers,
523.
it's probably estimate, yeah, yep. So anyway, so I don't know if you want to just have discussion around this, or you as a board want to talk through what's here before we start talking about what are we going to potentially do about it.
Do you have a sense of whether Celeste is continuing to receive inquiries? Or those kind of slowing down since school has started? Or
Our office is pretty busy with continued phone calls coming in. I think that, Winhall calls come in probably proportionately the same way they do for other communities. There are more calls coming in at this time of the year than we typically have. I think we're all expecting that. There are many, many pending home sales throughout our supervisory unions. So we expect that those will continue.
okay. So we're probably not done at a limit, or, the current enrollment of 235 is probably going to go up.
It's actually stayed fairly
It has.
fairly stable. I'm thinking about Well, fairly stable. It's August 27th was when I submitted my testimony to the House Ways and Means, and it's the 15th. And the numbers are very, very similar to what they were then. So that's actually kind of interesting. So, and it's stayed around here for probably close to the last month.
Yeah, because I think when you first started polling the numbers for us, or when Celeste did, we were looking at like 230, and then it went up, and then it went back down, and so okay.
So that happened.
So do you need any more discussion on this? I mean, there's I don't know, you can see it. You're all incredibly intelligent people. We're very, very skilled at reading these charts at this point. So
I would just say that, I'm sorry, Randy, I didn't mean to cut
No,
you
that's
off.
okay. Go ahead, Jane.
You're muted on mine for a second. I would just say for everyone who's in attendance, who's either called in or it hasn't been to a Winhall meeting or is watching on YouTube, this is very much a thing that we deal with every single year. So this isn't like completely unexpected. It's just the magnitude of the problem this year is probably the biggest that we've faced.
By a lot.
It's even worse magnitude wise than where we were 2 years ago when we really dug in and started the process as far as trying to figure out a path forward that made sense. But I would just encourage anyone who is listening or watching that isn't familiar with the concepts that we're talking about as far as rolling to your averages for enrollment and actual versus anticipated. There's definitely information available from our previous meetings and community outreach, and we would be happy to make that available to anyone who wants it as far as how to understand the math behind this stuff, because at its core, what we're dealing with is a math problem. This is a formula problem. We got a formula that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us. And there's all kinds of reasons why that is and all kinds of things we can change. So I know we have a lot of people that have just moved here who are really interested in what's going on and have a vested interest in it going forward. So I would just say that there is absolutely information and material out there if you need it. And if you reach out to us, we will make sure you get it. And that's all.
Thanks, Dean.
The only thing I would say is that it's really also important to understand how these decisions impact us financially as a community and impact our tax base, and understanding the math behind why this is such a sensitive issue for the school board, and how it directly may impact you as a new community member or an existing community member. I think that's really important as well. And I think that's included in the information that Dean is alluding to.
Thanks.
Okay. It is complicated, and both of you expressed that incredibly well. So, so if we're ready to transition into what we identified on the agenda as legislative, essentially we wanted to make sure that both Dean and Meredith, as well as the greater community, did have a good sense of the work that's been happening over the last couple of months. We know that that our legislators have been in session, and the work this summer was intended to try to capitalize on that as much as possible. So in the packet, you can see a summary of a very, very skeletal summary, which probably could have been, what, I bet 15 pages of notes and details related to, I mean, that's an estimate, but right, the work that's been done, the conversations, the meetings, the emails, the advocacy that has happened. So you have a snippet of that work, and as well as a very detailed email that Jennifer sent to Representative Kate Webb from the House Ed Committee, and testimony that I submitted to the House Ways and Means Committee that was supposed to be hearing testimony that day and on this topic, but did not. You can see that it's been a very quiet. The Winhall School District, I would say, Jen, I'm going to summarize this. People have been very, very empathetic sympathetic, understanding of the situation. At times, I believe I would say making us feel hopeful that something would be brought to the floor of the House or the Senate, and it didn't happen. So there's a lot of sympathy locally without necessarily that being able, for whatever reason, to translate directly to the legislature. So it does seem very clear. I think both Jennifer and I have received information pretty directly that this isn't going to be taken up at the state level, and so you'll see a statement saying at this point, I think part of the conversation in order to offer any level of relief for FY22 for Winhall is to be really creative locally and see if there's any possibility of some local decisions, commitments to try to support the district through the development of the budget and through the next fiscal year. So I'll sort of end with that, turn it over to you, Jennifer, and then open it up for whatever level of discussion. But I just wanted to set the stage.
Yeah, I think, my understanding, and I think Randy's exactly right. There have been, many of the phone calls or conversations that I've had with people, they understand what the issue is. One of the things that I keep having to remind myself of is that Winhall is not, the only town who's suffering financially because of the pandemic. So although our issue is somewhat unique, we're not the only district that's looking for relief on some level. So we're not alone. And any possible avenues for relief, if it's money that's being directed to Winhall, there are ripple effects from that. And I think people are being very, very cautious about what those ripple effects might be, what they might look like. So my understanding is that it is unlikely that this is going to be taken up by the House, certainly before they adjourn again for the remainder of the calendar year. There's still a possibility that it might be raised by the Senate. And the only suggestion that I would offer there is, certainly people are welcome to email our senators, Brian Campion and Dick Sears. Their emails are certainly available publicly. And I think, really the issue is, we've had unexpected numbers of families moving here. The tax rate is, what Randy has calculated with her testimony. The tax rate is projected to increase 46 cents, and that's not even including the penalty that would undoubtedly be triggered. And, anyone who feels inclined to email the senators, I don't know what that would do to one's ability to pay property taxes, but that would be relevant because I can imagine for some people this would be a real hardship. And I think it can be literally that simple. I have no idea what the likelihood is that the Senate is going to take this up either. But it's, kind of the one remaining legislative avenue that I can identify. But I think other than that, sort of, if you look at, we've got an issue and there are a number of different ways that we can sort of approach it. One thing that we as a community could consider are, ways to work with our schools to come up with other non-legislative solutions to the issue.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to echo what Randy said. This is an incredible amount of work that you put into this, and we definitely recognize that. When this email went out and I saw the list of people that you've been talking to, I mean, I knew you'd been working on it behind the scenes, but I mean, you've really outdone yourself. So thank you for taking the time to do that.
Well, I'd love to have better news.
No, but I think it's important for me to say that, especially considering, the history of this board and how it started. And I just want to say, I think that you absolutely kicked it out of the park with this one. So
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like we got to, if we're going to do anything, like we have to, if there's going to be some sort of community involvement at the, like, write your senator level, like we have to do it now. It has to be this moment. I
Mhm.
just don't think we're ever going to get another example of like, this is a perfectly highlights the issue that we've been trying to raise for God knows how long, that nobody seems to understand, let alone be interested in solving. And so it's reassuring to hear that, you know, the understanding of what the problem is has grown. I know that Oliver and Kelly definitely understand it. They've been involved in it from the very beginning. So yeah, I mean, I feel like if that's what we're going to do, like, we have to do it in this moment. I don't think we can wait till the next time we get screwed over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would say there is I think I think there's a certain amount of empathy as people consider the likely surge to our tax rate. Um, I'm not sure that anyone has the appetite to reconsider the funding formula. I think it's really just looking for avenues for relief because of this unexpected population surge, if that makes sense. I mean,
No,
I
it
feel like
does
I'm
make
splitting
sense.
hairs,
It's
but that,
disappointing, but it makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
you know, we're just gonna, if we're gonna get anything, it's just gonna be slap a Band-Aid on it. It's not gonna be comprehensive reform. I understand that.
I think part of the fundamental issue is that we're up against a deadline here. So as nice as it would be to potentially reform some things, I'm not sure they're going to be able to enact the reform in the timetable that we need. And so by the time our tax rate is impacted, I'm not certain that that they're going to be able to meet our deadline. And
Or
so
any town's deadline. I mean,
What?
particularly, or any town's deadline.
Or
I mean,
any
because my
town.
understanding is as soon as they pass the budget for the remainder of the fiscal year, they're adjourning until January.
Right. So part of the thing is, I think it's a wonderful idea to write letters to the to our state representative, but I also feel like we really need to come up with some alternative solutions as well. And, one of the things that I was at least thinking, or I can wait and hear what you guys think first. Whatever
Oh,
you.
by all means, what do you got?
What-
Give me something.
So, I think part of the fundamental issue that we're facing is that we've got this, give or take $500,000 hit. And one of the things that I would recommend us doing is, given the fact that we're already looking at a revenue anticipation note borrowing through the Winhall Town School District, is to be able to do some form of educational bond that would be secured by future taxes, because we know that the biggest fundamental issue is that there's a gap between the people moving in and buying properties and sending their kids to school this year versus what they're going to be paying in taxes next year, because a lot of those residences may be converted to primary or from secondary. So I assume that there will be a higher tax base for 2021 2022 as time goes out than there is now. And so if there's a way that we can at least bridge part of the gap with some form of maybe 3-year bond, I think it will allow us to have a little breathing room to right size and see if we can't balance the budget. Granted, it's kicking the can, but it just may be a solution, because I don't think that our taxpayers are going to want that high an increase in taxes. I don't want that high an increase. Let me rephrase that. I, as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay that. No, I mean, it's exorbitant.
So Sue, I was actually going to ask your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I've already talked to the bank about this, and and Meredith, that would have been my recommendation to you when we get to budget and we start talking about, all right, we have this big deficit. We don't want that entire deficit being rolled into next year. And so it's not a bond through the town. It's just simply a loan through the bank. And, again, it's going to come with a nice low interest rate, and it would be 3 years, and we're allowed to do that. We would pay it off over 3 years. We'd include the payment in our budget, of course, so that we can make the payment and the interest as well. But no, we don't want to hit the tax rate with that entire deficit in 1 year. Because, you know, then you've got your double whammy. You've got all your kids in there for next year and the deficit as well. We already know what that does to your tax rate. So
If
Yeah.
we were to pursue that, could we borrow enough money to keep us out of penalty?
yeah,
That was actually, Jen, that was going to be my next question. So I'm so happy you asked that.
So there's a bunch of things that get excluded from the penalty calculation, and what all of these things that we're talking about are exclusions. This money that we would borrow is an exclusion. A deficit that gets created if it's rolled into your budget. So, like, say the portion of the deficit that would get rolled, you know, if we decided to roll some of it, and if it's due to students moving in after that you weren't able to include in your budget because they moved in after you voted your budget, that's another exclusion. And we take advantage of that sort of every other year. We take advantage of that exclusion. There's another exclusion for kids who move in after ADM is taken, so you're unable to include them in the next year's budget. And there's a formula calculation that's included for that. We would take advantage of that if we could. So basically, whenever we're dealing with that sort of penalty conversation, that's part of it, is what can we exclude prior to any penalty being calculated. It doesn't help with the large amount of money that we're going to have to spend next year on all those students who moved in this year as just part of the regular budget, because, you know, you're talking about $20,000, you know, is a penny on the tax rate about approximately. And so that exists regardless of penalty. But the bulk of what we're talking about, I think, is going to all be exclusions. And so with respect to just the penalty part of the formula, we can probably get out of all of it, if not most of it. We'll talk more about that when we actually have the budget in front of us and we can actually see what those exclusions might be. But the exclusions are all in statute. So they're already built in to have that protection for you when you have these kids move into district after the fact.
Okay. Well, that's reassuring.
Sue, can I ask another question on a similar type of subject? But one of the things one of the emails that I received had a bunch of legislature, and there was a bunch of individual school districts that seem to have gotten refunds. Do you know what I think?
Are you possibly talking about final cash flow?
Mhm.
Okay, so the way the state works it is they do what's called a preliminary cash flow based on the grand list that they get at the beginning of the year. And then as things change, they settle up towards the end of the year. So they do a final cash flow. And that just means it doesn't change the amount of money that the Winhall Town School District keeps, because they get a certain amount of money for education fund, period. So there generally is not going to be a settle up between the town and the school district, because we don't get any money from the state. But when there's money coming from the state and from the town, and the towns also give money to the state has to sort of settle all that up. And so sometimes in the preliminary cash flow, you may have a town that sends the school district more money than they actually have to, because the state has to give us some of that money. So there is sometimes I have to pay a town back from a school district, or sometimes the town has to give me more money. So it just depends on how when the state does their settling up for their final cash flow at the end of the year.
Okay, thanks. Jen, how do we move to kind of consider whether do we need approval to get the $500,000 loan? How does that work? Is that something we vote on or discuss, or?
Well, that's going to come up as we get closer to calculating the budget, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, you can ask, Sue can explain that process to you.
Yeah, we'll decide that during the budget process. And then you would approve that loan in the same manner that you just approved the revenue anticipation note. You know, I'm going to go out and request bids from banks on that note, and I'll bring it to you for approval, and we'll borrow the money, but we want to build it into our budget. So it's going to be part of the budgeting process.
And by the way, I mean, am I right that even if we spread this over 3 years, it's still going to hurt a lot?
Yeah. I mean, it's still a lot of money, right? It's not, right. We're not talking about, which is why we're doing it, because 1/3 is still going to be better. Yeah.
Is the tenor always 3 years, or could you spread it out over 5 with early repayment?
I want to say the 3 years is a statutory thing, but I will look all that up to you and bring it to you before we start talking about budget, or when we start talking about budget.
I am glad we mentioned at least that it is a possibility, because, you know, at least it offers some form of reprieve and a solution before we, you know, panic that our taxes are going through the roof and people won't be able to.
The other thing too, there might be some appetite in the legislature to find a way to lend us that money and allow us to pay it back without paying interest. So maybe that's something that, you know, I could follow up with to see if that would be a possibility.
So that I think is a great idea, Jen, because they did pass, you know, they did that for the towns. So it's not that they had a bill where, and I can't really speak to it because it was for the municipalities, but they did have a bill about interest-free borrowing. I don't know that it's not necessarily interest-free, but they were going to forgive it in some way, shape, or form, or perhaps they were giving relief for it. Perhaps there were maybe COVID relief funds that they would reimburse the towns for. I don't know. So speaking out of turn, but there was definitely a bill about supporting the towns with respect to interest on borrowing that they would have to do. And I can find that for you.
Okay.
It would be nice if they tacked something like that on for us. Now we don't, we weren't part of that. And, but this is something that's pretty specific. You're talking about that 3-year note. You're not talking about regular cash flow borrowing. So I don't know, it might be interesting to see if they could apply that to us.
Okay. Yeah. And I will say, like, I would love it if we could get COVID relief funds for this, but it seems fairly clear that the answer is no. Unfortunately.
Right now, but you know, things change every day. So
yeah. Well, and my understanding is that the state is trying to work with the feds to get some relaxation of the COVID relief fund guidelines to allow those monies to be used for other expenses that so far have not been approved expenses. So that would be great, because I think Vermont still has, you know, a significant amount of money left that, you know, the state has not been able to allocate.
Yeah, all of COVID relief will be interesting to see how it ends up being played out.
Listen, if American Airlines can get an interest-free loan, we should be able to get one too.
It's a terrific point.
All right. Any other discussion?
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, guys. Okay.
We just have this distribution of the financial management questionnaire. This is the BRSU approves this, so it's just for distribution. There's no action or anything on your part on it, but just to get it in your hands.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is up to you, Jen.
Board updates, anyone? In addition to, you know, the board update that has already been included in the agenda packet, the only other thing that I will say is about a month ago, I was appointed to the State Board of Education. So I had my first meeting last month. I've got my second meeting tomorrow. So it's work that I love to do.
You are diving in head first.
I guess I am thrown in the deep end.
Congratulations. They're lucky to have you.
Thank you. Okay. Agenda items for next meeting. And as we discuss that, can I suggest that it might be helpful in October? Maybe not.
What are the agenda items that are that we need to sort of make decisions about in October, do you think?
I think just continuing to follow the enrollment and then maybe updates about any possible avenues for relief.
We can set up a meeting. We can also kind of keep people updated unless we think that there be some decisions that we need to make.
Well, that is a good point. I mean, I don't know that there would be decisions to be made, but it would be more of just updating.
Do you want to put it on, and then if we need it, then we can use it, and if not, then we don't have to meet?
Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think that that's fine.
Okay.
If-
Okay. Dean and Meredith, do you guys agree?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Let me just find out when the other meetings are that month.
Okay.
Maybe Tuesday the 20th.
I could do that.
That works for me.
I'm good.
Okay. So let me change the next meeting date to October 20th at 5 p.m.
Okay,
Okay,
great. Thank you.
sure.
So, yeah, I mean, I as far as my thoughts is just, to get the enrollment updates and then any discussion on potential avenues for relief.
Can I ask a quick question? Did we already add the extra verbiage to the residency requirements for Winhall?
We have it's under our legal review right now. I expect that we'll have it in the near future. I'll give her a call or email her tomorrow and find out if they're done yet or not.
And will that be also retroactive to anybody who has already submitted?
Yeah, they can certainly be sent. We talked about that, going back and sending them to people with the new page on it,
Okay,
or sending them that new just that one page to complete.
thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anything else? Okay. Public comment, if anyone has anything that they'd like to add.
Jen, this is Emily Strudel here. Could you just go over again the points, if we were to write emails to the senators, the points that you think are the most salient for them right now to hear?
Sure. Yeah, and I think everyone can have it's going to be a personal email for everyone, because I think the projected tax rate is going to hit every family differently. But I think it really can be as simple as, we have 35 and counting unexpected students that were not accounted for in our budget. And we are looking at a projected tax hike of at least 46 cents. And these numbers are obviously in a state of flux. And then the third point is, what would that do to your ability to pay your taxes? And I mean, it's funny because when I got this number, I thought, well, I don't even know what that means really, but it's 46 cents per $100 of property value. So the nice thing about this time of year is I have a copy of my property tax bill sitting in my file. And I went through and basically, you can see the grand list value that the town has ascribed to your house. And then that number basically gets divided by 100. And then that value is multiplied by the tax rate, which this current year, I believe, was $1.7725. And that's what your property tax bill is. So it's a pretty, you can look at the tax bill, you can run the calculation. And so I took that information and then I just added 46 cents to that, $1.7725 and multiplied it by the taxable base. And I got my new tax bill. And then I could decide how would that affect me? What does that mean to me? Can I pay that? If I can't pay it, what's my recourse? So I think it's really just as simple as, these are, by and large, I think a lot of the families who have moved here in response to the pandemic. I think historically, Dean, Meredith, and I have worked really, really hard with the BRSU to really come up with a formula that accounts for growth, that has tried to, provide some predictability to our tax rate. And, the pandemic sort of upended things for everyone. And, the school board is just another one of the groups that's having to deal with these unexpected effects from the pandemic. So increase in numbers, increase in tax rate, what does this do to your ability to pay it? It really can be that simple.
Yeah, and it's not just, it's not only people who are moving here with children. I mean, you have to think also the people that are completely outside of the education system who are only taxpayers, who don't, you're talking about elderly people on fixed income. Their taxes get hit just as hard as everybody else's. And I think that might be an argument that might be persuasive to certain senators.
Yeah.
Yes, Dean, that's really important. And I am wondering what the best method is to get in touch with those people in our community, because I think their voices would be really important to be heard at the state level on this issue.
If it were a normal year and not pandemic year, I would say you should come to one of our senior lunches, because you'll get to talk to all of them. But those obviously aren't happening now. But I do believe that there is an email list.
Yeah, Lisa Stark. I wonder, do you want me to send an email to Lisa? Does anyone else want to do it? I can do it.
I'd be happy to do it. Or
Okay.
if you,
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great, thank you. I mean, the one thing that I just want to put out there, and I hate to be Cassandra, but you guys are so great at the problem solving. I just really do want to point out to the community that this tax rate puts us above a place where our community considered a real crisis not too long ago. So, we shouldn't leave this meeting feeling like things are settled and comfortable based on your calm problem solving. It really is a very serious situation, and I think it's important for people to understand that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, when we were confronted with this issue 2 years ago, we had 29 students who showed up. And if my memory serves me correct, I think that was 17 more than we had anticipated in our budget. And that was enough to throw our town into upheaval. That was the year that Burton kindly gave us the Hail Mary to keep us out of penalty, and made fairly clear that they, were not doing that as a routine matter of course. And that was just 17 kids. Because Winhall is so small, and because we have just a very small population of students, I often say it's like dancing on the head of a pin. The smallest increases will have a, deleterious effect on our budget very quickly.
Well, Jen, one thing that I think would be incredibly helpful is if someone, perhaps you can give kind of a brief, super brief history of what happened 2 years ago when we did have this number of students. And because we're all kind of talking about the elephant in the room of what, the upheaval was, or what, that just maybe you could explain.
Sure, and you guys can certainly jump in, because you were, up to your elbows with me.
Quite something, right?
So we had, again, and I might be slightly off on the numbers, but my memory is that we had budgeted for 12, what we call ghost students, who are, students who are not known to the BRSU at the time that we passed the budget in March, but we anticipate will move into our district before school starts in September. So part of the problem is the way, the statute is set up, the way the funding formula is set up. The school board, we will actually begin our work in November to pass our budget in January before it goes to print and is put in hand for every resident for town meeting in March. So in March, the voters approve our budget for a school year that then doesn't start until September. So every year we build in what we call our ghost students. So 2 years ago, we had built in 12 ghost students. We ended up with 29 students. And those additional 17 students were enough to really throw us into penalty. because we are a sending town to Burton,
A tax penalty.
yes, a tax penalty that once you get within 121% of your budget, then you pay a dollar for dollar that you exceed the budget. Am I correct?
I think it's cost per equalized pupil that it's
Okay.
factored off of, but yes.
Okay. And at that point, there was a petition that was circulated within the community to explore merging with Taconic and Green, which is our also part of the BRSU, but T&G operates public schools for K-8 and then has choice for high school. As a school board, we explored that possibility, and the issue was merging with T&G would not have drastically lowered our tax rate. What ended up happening at town meeting, like literally on the floor in March 2 years ago, was that Burton agreed to accept the state minimum for that year instead of the slightly higher sending town tuition rate, which kept us out of penalty. But we still ended up, I forget what our tax rate was. But it was well the highest in the state for that year. And this year is, on pace to break that record.
It was $1.90 something, I think, right?
Well, I think it ended up, it was over $2.
Right. Sue, do you remember, was it 220 or something like that? 280?
Yeah, I remember it was supposed to be around 220 something, but I think then after the yield and everything, it ended up coming down a little, but off the top of my head, no,
212 maybe. I think it might have been like
I
212.
actually I can look it up though. I actually have
I
that
think,
open.
but I also think that was when we did a ton of work, changed some of the residency requirements, and then we wound up actually finding some money.
So we were at 212.
Mhm.
So then we started a tax stabilization fund, which worked brilliantly for about 5 seconds, and then COVID hit, and we still have money in the tax stabilization fund. I think we have $220,000 in there, something.
I don't think,
like
well, maybe.
Maybe less because
a
of
Give me a
fair
second.
chunk of change.
Give me a second.
Who knows?
You have you have about 214.
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Yeah.
But that's not nearly enough to cover our shortfall this year. I mean, like, I think the quick napkin math was what, $560,000, $500,000, give or
Mhm.
take.
Yeah.
So that's not even half of what we would need to come up with to stay out of penalty. So even though we did explore creative options and we did create a tax stabilization fund, which did work in a normal year, which we were pretty optimistic about. This is not a normal year, and it's just insufficient to meet the challenge that we have this year.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Reflection on norms. Yeah, these are difficult conversations, but what's really clear to me too is how much everyone, the BRSU, Dean, Meredith, the people in the audience care deeply about this. So, I mean, it gives me hope as a community. We will, find a way forward, whatever the answer is. So thank you all. Okay, so the next meeting date will be October the 20th at 5 p.m. Probably the same format.
I would expect to at this point.
Okay. All righty. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Adjourn at 5:55.
Yes.